Hello there, people. Welcome to Flight Chat, the listener feedback show for the Flight Cast. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I was saying before, this is going to be like every other week now, like as far as like doing the feedback show. So as far as emails or any other correspondence that you want to send to be read over the show, just sit tight. It'll be every other week that we do an episode of this, every other Sunday, if you will, with respect to the weekend, unless, of course, something else happens to the schedule, and I will try and let everybody know as soon as possible in advance if that changes. But yes, every other week for Flight Chat. And we've got some new emails for this particular episode. Longtime listeners, of course, returning to the fray, some of whom did email in the last episode of Flight Chat over the last couple of months or so that it was out of commission, but we're back. Here we go. So let's dive into it without further ado. And we begin customarily with a couple of emails from John that he sent in for Flight Chat. Some shorter ones and a very important question one about a news story that's popped up recently that I really don't know where it's going to go, but we'll get to that here in a bit. Let's start with his first email, where he said he was, quote, going in DC heavy as he normally does. But at any rate, the first point here he raises, he says, so there's some patterns with some fans who have been complaining. What else is new? Yeah, nothing. And all because Gunn inherited a franchise that's been in quagmire now for the last several years. Because of the past missteps Warner Brothers and DC have made, they're already deeming the DCU a mess or dead on arrival, all because Gunn inherited a fixer-upper. Okay. He says it's not his fault that another Batman franchise is happening while he's creating his own universe. Besides, had Dwayne Johnson or someone else been in charge, fans would complain either way. That's 100% true. But John asks, is this a fixable mess? I don't think average viewers are going to care how, say, Shazam connects to Creature Commandos or the Suicide Squad connects to Superman, or will they even care if there are two different Batman actors? I'm at a point where I don't care, he says. I've been reading comic books for 25 years. It's common for DC to change continuity all the time, but retain some elements. Whether they change the universe in Crisis on Infinite Earths and then change more things and keep some things in 0 Hour Infinite Crisis, Flashpoint, Convergence, Rebirth, Doomsday Clock, but that's DC. The DCU doesn't need a 100% hard reboot, he says. If some elements worked, then I don't see an issue with it. Viola Davis is a great Amanda Waller, John Cena is great as Peacemaker, Steve Agee is great as Economos, etc. Would a full reboot have been easier in terms of separating and diversifying the franchises in order to make sense of things? Sure, but honestly, if there's creative reasons to grandfather some actors over it, I'm fine with it. This feels like what you said about people being conditioned to the MCU-esque homework problem. It's only a problem if these fans make it their problem. Even Marvel doesn't always have consistent continuity, but that hasn't stopped them because of their gold standard BS people buy into. Although post-Endgame, I'd say Marvel's has been the silver standard, while DC's been the bronze standard. Interesting. He says, I don't mean that as an insult to DC. Bronze is only behind two of the biggest values. All right. Decent amount to unpack there, but really, honestly, to answer the question, is this a fixable mess? Yes, because it's really not that much of a mess, to be honest with you. And it's 100% true to talk about how the general audience, what did he say? He said, I don't think average viewers are going to care how Shazam connects to Creature Commandos or Suicide Squad connects to Superman. No, they're not. They absolutely are not, John. And they are not going to care about two Batmen either. Like, fans find it difficult, and in some cases impossible, to understand or accept a world where the general audience doesn't care as much as they do about these characters. And that's where it really goes off the rails with respect to expectations. There was a video recently that I saw on Blue Sky, and, we've been going through this Star Trek Section 31 nonsense. And, the fans of Star Trek have really shown their ass. A lot of them have, with respect to their reactions and their just toxic vitriol to Section 31. This minor movie, and yes, it is a minor movie that came out on Paramount Plus, and you've got these fans talking about how it's the death of the franchise, it's this, it's that, and all this ridiculousness. And I found a video from a man named Steve Shivs, I don't know how you pronounce this, but he apparently does a lot of YouTube videos, and he made a video recently called Your Fandom, Your Problem. And quite honestly, he dresses down the fandom and talks about how, you don't have to like Section 31, you can feel however you want about it, but death threats and all manner of seriousness and acting like people who don't care that much, people who aren't angry that Section 31 exists, it does not mean that they're any less of a fan than those who are incredibly angry about it, which I 1000% agree. And the best quote that I found out of the video was the one that I used when I reposted it on Blue Sky. He said, at the end of the day, it's just a effing movie. And he's 1000% correct on that. And that's something that fans just don't get. At the end of the day, it's just an effing movie. It's just an effing TV show. And the general audience, the average viewers, could not care less about what you care about. So all this hand wringing and all this caterwauling and talking about how DC is this damaged goods fixer-upper brand bullshit. 1000% bullshit. DC is superheroes, just like Marvel is superheroes, and that's all the general audience has ever looked at them as, and probably will ever look at them as. I've gone over this 1,000 times with respect to people in the general audience that to this day are waiting for Aquaman to show up in the Avengers and Spider-Man to show up as part of the Justice League. This is true. I have talked to people in real life who feel this way because they don't care about Marvel DC. And again, it's that 90 to 95% of the audience that we talk about that these movies and these television shows are primarily geared toward. Remember, the studios have our dollars. They have our money. They have our attention. Even if you hate watch Superman, even if you hate watch the DCU, they've got your money. That's all they care about, right? They know they have the fans. So this idea that they've got to do exactly what the fans want has always been bullshit. They don't. And they shouldn't, because we're not the primary breadwinners in this regard. We will watch our favorite characters, even if it's to be mad about it. And they know this about us. They understand this about our behavior. So yeah, is it a fixable mess? Yes, because it's not a mess. DC as a brand has never been damaged in that regard, right? You know, not on the long term. Okay, if we want to talk about damage within among the fans and in terms of hype and in terms of trying to build a contiguous universe, yeah, sure. But the silly part is people are going to point to that last year of the last 4 movies of the DCEU, and they're going to say, well, that's proof of failure. Look at how badly The Flash bombed. Look at how badly Blue Beetle and Shazam Fear of the Gods didn't make money. Look at how much less Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom made money on. It was a dead franchise. We knew this the entire year of 2023. We knew that there was going to be reboots, so we weren't hyping it up. We weren't telling the general audience to go see it. And the general audience wasn't that interested in seeing it either because the people in charge weren't building a cohesive narrative and they weren't marketing it properly. That has nothing to do with DC as a brand itself, right? It's not like, well, now all of a sudden people aren't going to see Batman. How is it that they went and saw Batman, the Batman, in 2022 in the midst of all the DCEU chaos? And how is it that the Penguin got so critically acclaimed on on Max and HBO, truthfully, just some months ago, right? So don't tell me that the DC brand is damaged beyond repair or it's damaged goods. That's fans wanting to believe that dumb shit. It's not damaged. All it takes is a steady hand to market it properly and to push it out there. But these labels and these characters are never damaged beyond repair. Marvel is not damaged beyond repair. All it takes is another hit. Another thing to appeal to. At this point, truthfully, for Marvel, all it takes is team-ups. Like team-ups with Deadpool and Wolverine or all the Spider-Man coming together. That's really all it takes for them to earn $1 billion at the movie theater in that regard, right? These brands are not irrevocably damaged. They are not. And it's not a mess that's being inherited. So anybody that's deeming the DCU a mess or dead on arrival, they're idiots. And they're fans that are, just living in their own delusional world of we want everything to fail. People that are rooting for the failure of James Gunn and the DCU because they're still bitter about the DCEU. And if you want to be bitter and, an asshole about it, that's your business. But the idea that, oh my goodness, it's such a mess because the general audience isn't going to understand how Peacemaker fits or how Amanda Waller is still Viola Davis. They don't give a shit. They don't. They largely do not give a shit. They may ask a question or two, but what it comes down to is how much do they like the show? How much do they like the movies? That's really all that's gonna matter. And how much does the marketing draw them in that regard? If Gunn and Safran get all of that right, then all the rest of that other little canonical, continuity bullshit is not going to matter. Tell me how Fox X-Men went as long as it did, right? And literally produced 2 different X-Men casts that were supposed to be the same. We had Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy as Professor X. We had Sir Ian McKellen, and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. We had Halle Berry and Alexandra Shipp as Storm. All of these were supposed to be in the same universe, but they really weren't. And continuity went out the window halfway through that franchise. And yet, people still turned out for Logan. People still turned out to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. People still turned out to see Days of Future Past. Like, people still turned out for Deadpool, and Deadpool's connected to that. So don't give me this broken canon continuity shit. We have plenty of examples of otherwise with respect to superheroes and with respect to these brands because the general audience simply does not care about all that little minutia the same way that we as fans do. We have ample evidence of this, and people who still can't understand that to this point, you know what? That's their business. They can go and sit with their head in the sand as long as they want. Rest of us, I think, know exactly what the truth is in that regard. So that's the biggest answer to that question, John. Let's get to your second point here in your first email. Oh dear, I don't like this first sentence. He says, I've been watching John Campea again a bit. Oh, here we go. John Campea. There's a name that if I never heard again, I'd probably die happy. But whatever. Let's see. He says he's insistent that Superman will not be a billion-dollar film. And I tend to agree. I don't think it will unless it gets an A+ cinema score, which, while not impossible, doesn't seem likely since not even The Dark Knight could do it. It got an A. But the biggest trailer debut in Warner Brothers history? I think it can at least top 800 million, which Campea and his correspondent Jonathan don't think it will. But John's brother-in-law, also named Ray, thinks it could pass 800 million. DC movies tend to do well when they get in the A range cinema score. If Superman gets an A or an A minus, then I do think it'll get between 750 to 850 million, which would be a win for a franchise film debut. What's your prediction as of this episode? I have no prediction, John. I really don't, because I feel like this is one of those cases again where giving a prediction on box office score is feeding into the beast that is scoreboard mentality, and I'm not doing that. You know I hate scoreboard mentality. Campea can think whatever he wants. If I had to venture a guess, I would probably lean on the side of cautious optimism in terms of it earning $1 billion. It takes a lot for a comic book film to earn $1 billion. And I know people think otherwise with respect to Marvel, but I've seen the bad faith argument come up a lot, over the last 8 or 9 years when talking about how easy it is for you. Remember the whole BVS argument. A Batman and Superman team up should earn $1 billion easily. That dumb shit, without giving any regard to the fact that it took 5 movies for Marvel to reach $1 billion with the first Avengers film. And that was a buildup, right? That was, the first 2 Iron Man films. It was Thor. It was Captain America: The First Avenger, right? It was Incredible Hulk. Even Incredible Hulk is one of the lowest grossing Marvel movies in the franchise, in the MCU, right? But it took that buildup for them to get to that $1 billion with Avengers, and the massive team up occurred, right? And then you had $1 billion for the Iron Man 3 sequel that I really like. Truthfully, that I don't know how it's been adjudicated to these. I know a lot of people still don't like that movie, fans worth or whatever, but I've always liked that film, and it's one of the top earners for the MCU. But it was a build up, right? You didn't come out right out the gate with a new franchise with this, and I think that's definitely the case here with Superman. Okay, I think your benchmark for Superman, if we're going to do any type of predictions, John, I will say this much: the benchmark is Man of Steel. The benchmark is what Man of Steel did, right? If you're talking about budgets, Man of Steel had what, a $200 million budget, made 668 million. I'm sure plenty of people nowadays will call that a failure. Oh my goodness! And they'll bring up marketing budgets and all the other dumb shit that we just started caring about after BVS because of all the rationalizations that the critics and the comic creators and whatnot were using to try and call BVS a failure, even though it never was a failure. BVS was not commercially a failure whatsoever. It made profit at the box office and made profit in home theater sales. We have documented objective proof of that. But the point is, I would say that for a first film, you're saying between 750, 850 million, and I don't think the trailer views mean shit, John, to be honest with you. I don't think that trailer views on YouTube mean that much. I really don't, because that's a lot of fans jumping on that. Doesn't tell me that the general audience is going to jump on that. It really does not, because how much of the general audience watches YouTube like that? I still question. I don't know. YouTube is out there, and a lot of people watch YouTube, but am I ready to say that 90 to 95% that they represent, what those trailer views did, or that the trailer views represent how they feel? No, I'm not ready to say that yet. So I don't know. It's all a crapshoot. Box office and a lot of this stuff is a crapshoot. It comes down to marketing, comes down to how DC Studios pushes this, how James Gunn and Peter Safran proceed going forward all the way up to July 11th with this in that regard, right? But I would say Man of Steel is your benchmark. Truthfully, depending on the budget, but somewhere between Man of Steel and the Batman. The Batman did what? Mid 700s, 770 if I'm not mistaken. So that's your benchmark, I would say, with respect to box office. For this to not be considered a failure, if you will. No, I would lean towards it not making a billion. Now, if it makes a billion, then there you have it. You're off to the races in that regard. But this, we'll see how it goes. But I really think it comes down to that marketing, and it comes down to just how it appeals to the general audience in that regard, not the fans. Again, we are not the measure with respect to that. And John Campea, I don't need to give you any more warnings about paying attention to John Campea, John. I feel like I've done more than enough warnings with that over the years, to be honest with you. We know what category he falls into for a number of reasons. Quite toxic in that regard. But moving on, that's more John Campea than I thought I would ever talk about again. But it doesn't surprise me anybody would bring him up again. Third question that John had in his first email. He asked, do you see Streaky the Supercar appearing in the DCU at some point? Gun's an animal lover and loves dogs and cats equally. I don't know who Streaky the Supercar is. This is where my lack of knowledge here now. I'm gonna Google this and see exactly who the hell. I mean, clearly it's an animal of some sort. Here, let's see. Streaky the Super Cat. Okay, all right. So it was written Supercar, maybe autocorrect got him on that. Streaky the Super Cat. Let's see, a fictional superhero cat that appears in comic books published by DC Comics. Supergirl's pet cat, who gained superpowers through exposure to X-kryptonite, such as flight, super strength, super speed, invulnerability, and enhanced vision abilities, among other Kryptonian powers. His distinctive mark is a lightning bolt in his fur, running along both sides. He is also a member of the Legion of Super Pets, alongside other superpowered animals such as Crypto, Beppo, and Comet. The door's open, right? I have no idea if Streaky is in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow because I haven't read it yet. Uh, I don't know, but the door is open. You can't say no for sure if Crypto's there in the first Superman film. Then yeah, absolutely the possibility is there. Do I see it happening? I could see it happening. I can't tell you for certain if it will. I'm willing to allow James Gunn to make that decision. Yes, he is an animal lover, does have dogs and cats in his possession. Him and his wife Jennifer most certainly do. So yeah, entirely possible. Very possible that we could see Streaky the Super Cat. Whether or not we'll see them in Supergirl, I don't know. Remains to be seen. But doors open. Absolutely, the doors open. I think there's absolutely a possibility for that. So on to John's next email. He called this one, so updates for the flight officers. Ah, yes, the flight officers, the very loyal Patreon subscribers. But I'll go ahead and read this for this show. He says, I may have a new girlfriend now. Oh, all right. We've been chatting for 2 months and we're about to go on our first date before Valentine's Day. I'm not 100% over Laura, but it's been 6 months and she's moved on, and Tammy's been so nice to me. I feel a connection to her. Wish me luck, everyone. Good luck. Absolutely, John. Good luck. The faint heart never won fair lady. No doubt about that. I hear you. All right. Best of luck. Now, on to some questions for the show that he hopes are not too long. He's got a couple more here. First one for this second email. He asks, was I ever a fan of the show MST3K, Mystery Science Theater 3000? He said, I went to a riff track screening a week or so ago with a couple of buds. Some of the old cast were, plus Janet Varney, no relation to Jim. Yeah, no, definitely not. Who's best known for Korra the Avatar on Nickelodeon. I got a pic with her that he did send down below of this email. He said, I took some shots of the gang, even got to talk to one. I think it was Tom Sivo's actor. I'm a casual fan. I'm bad with names and faces. He said it also made me realize something. It's a shame Norm Macdonald never got the opportunity to do riff tracks when he was alive. If he had done riffing with the crew, he would have been a master at doing something like that. I even simulated that on ChatGPT, and it made me laugh. I'll share it with you in a private email sometime. I can't say that I missed the boat on Mystery Science Theater 3000. I've seen bits and pieces of it, and I get the appeal, and I don't knock people that are into it, but no, I never got into it, truthfully. It was never something that I necessarily watched. Because riff tracks, I'm not against riff tracks. I do think that they've gotten overblown, and like people love to do them for, movies that, in my opinion, don't necessarily deserve that type of scorn, if you will. But I realize that Mystery Science Theater 3000 was a different thing because of the types of movies and the age of the movies that they were talking about in the shows. And no, there's a big, huge following for it. I don't knock people that are into it, but no, I missed the boat on that personally, to be honest with you. But here, this next question, he says, speaking of ChatGPT, I asked it some questions about why a wing of DC fandom have this narrative that DC animation gets it right and DC live action gets it wrong, and it had some interesting points. Oh, here we go. Hey, we're getting into AI conversations now. That's interesting. He says, what I gathered from their ChatGPT perspective, it says, it's not a fair assessment fans give, and it is important to note that not every animated DC movie is good or successful, and not every live action DC film is bad and a failure. There's also objective data that supports the argument that DC, LA films are not only successful but have a place in pop culture. Whether it's shows like Rick and Morty acknowledging Wonder Woman 1984 or the Snyder Cut, fans dancing on the stairs where Joker was filmed, Harley Quinn cosplayers, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman and Jason Momoa as Aquaman are iconic, and even Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck have a following for their roles, not to mention Nolan's Batman trilogy are forever etched in the zeitgeist. Okay. He says ChatGPT, aka Noah, the name I gave him, also believes the direct to video animated films are less burdened by focus group studio politics, the cost that goes into it trying to appeal to a broad audience, plus the DC live action movies have a lot riding on them than the people who work on the animated stuff, a lot more riding on them. John says it's probably why I never bought into the narrative as well because DC animated films cater to hardcore fans. They forget that when DC animated movies try to be released in screens, they don't make much money. Even the biggest DC flops like Shazam Fury of the Gods have made a lot more money than most DC animated movies that played in theaters. Do you agree with any of this? What's your take? Well, I'm not a ChatGPT fan like that, but I agree with all of it, truthfully. I didn't need ChatGPT to tell me all of that, but it didn't say anything wrong in that regard. I mean, it is true. Not every animated DC movie is good or successful. Not every live DC and action movie is bad or and a failure, right? And there's certainly objective data that, like it says, supports that the DC films are successful and have a place in pop culture. You know, there are people. There's an argument out there that the fact that there is a Snyder Cut reference in Barbie, that yes, that is success in that regard, as far as capturing the cultural zeitgeist in that regard, or the Harley Quinn cosplayers, right? You know, because what are they cosplaying? When they're cosplaying Harley Quinn, they're cosplaying Margot Robbie's version, specifically the one from Suicide Squad, the David Ayer film, right? So you know, it's not like they're going back and putting on the Jester's outfit from the animated series, which a lot of the fans would have you believe. But yeah, it's the whole argument between animation and live action for DC. It's a fan driven argument. It's absolutely a fan driven argument. And there's, I'm sure, plenty of people in the general audience that do appreciate the animated films, but this idea that if they just did what the animated films did, then live action would be more successful is bullshit. Complete bullshit. If it were, then they would have already done that. They would have already thrown that up there. And as you've pointed out, John, and as I'm sure ChatGPT pointed out, that the animated films and live, like in theatrical release, don't do as well. This is even true with Marvel in that regard, right? Because look at the Spider-Verse films. As successful as the Spider-Verse films are, do they make anywhere near what the MCU films make as far as this billion-dollar expectation? Certainly not. No, not at all. And they've both been successful. Both Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse, successful films financially. But animation is cheaper. And yeah, the other point about how less pressure from focus groups, studio politics, and cost, absolutely. No doubt about it. There's much less pressure on an animated release, especially if it's direct to digital or if it's direct to Blu-ray or whatever. Yeah, so all of that, 100% agree with. No doubt about it. And this is stuff that fans either don't wish to accept or, choose to willingly not accept in that regard because they're just so set in their ways and they're just so stubborn with respect to what they think their expectations for any of these comic book properties, especially with DC, should be in that regard. But it always boils down to the same thing, John. They didn't do what they wanted them to do. There you have it. So that was John's second email. Now, how about this last one? This is the big question that he asks that I don't know where this one is going to go, but he asked, does this lawsuit have weight to it? He's talking about this lawsuit that is being levied against Superman, the new DC Superman film from the estate of the original creators. But John asks, do you think Superman will be able to release in those countries? If there's legal problems with the Siegel estate, maybe they should delay the movie to December. They'll probably make more money that way. Well, before getting into answering that question, John, let's just go over the story because I haven't talked about this yet on a main episode of the show. I'll read the deadline piece. This came out on Friday. It says Superman estate sues Warner Brothers Discovery and DC Comics to block release in key territories. It was written by Jill Goldsmith. And it says the estate of Superman creator Joseph Shuster is suing Warner Brothers Discovery and its DC Comics, claiming it lacks the rights to release the upcoming summer tentpole in a handful of key territories. Plaintiff Mark Warren Peary, executor to the estate, filed the suit on Friday in federal court in the Southern District of New York, seeking damages and injunctive relief for defendants' ongoing infringement in Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia, as well as declaratory relief establishing the Schuster estate's ownership rights across relevant jurisdictions. It says the matter is ripe for adjudication, it said, as defendants are actively planning a major new Superman motion picture and other derivative works for imminent worldwide release. It says the latest Superman, starring David Cornsweet in the title role, is in fact set for release on July 11th. We know who's in the cast, right? Warner and Peary and his longtime legal team have been in court rather often before this, most recently regarding termination rights under the U.S. Copyright Act. But the automatic foreign copyright reversion issue in this case did not occur until years later, said Mark Toberoff, an attorney for the estate, and was never actually litigated. Now it will be. Quote, we fundamentally disagree with the merits of the lawsuit and will vigorously defend our rights, end quote, said a Warner Brothers Discovery spokesman. At issue are foreign copyrights to the original Superman character and story co-authored by Jerome Siegel and Shuster, though Siegel and Shuster assigned worldwide Superman rights to DC's predecessor in 1938 for a mere $130, $65 each. The copyright laws of countries within the British legal tradition, including Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia, contain provisions automatically terminating such assignments 25 years after an author's death, vesting in the Schuster estate the co-author's undivided copyright interest in such countries, the suit said. Shuster died in 1992 and Siegel in 1996. By operation of law, Schuster's foreign copyrights automatically reverted to his estate in 2017 in most of these territories and in 2021 in Canada. Yet defendants continue to exploit Superman across these jurisdictions without the Schuster estate's authorization, including in motion pictures, television series, and merchandise, in direct contravention of these countries' copyright laws, which require the consent of all joint copyright owners to do so. That's end quote from the lawsuit itself. The article says this is bound to be most unwelcome as DC and parent Warner Brothers Discovery start to gear up for the release. The trailer was the most viewed, most talked about in the history of both DC and Warner Brothers, yada yada yada. When it hit in December, said DC Studios co-head James Gunn on X at the time. It says the lawsuit requests a jury trial, claiming defendants' act of direct infringement have been willful, intentional, and purposeful in wholesale disregard of and indifference to the rights of the plaintiff. As a direct and proximate result of defendants' infringement of the works, copyrights, and exclusive rights, plaintiff has been injured in an amount to be determined at trial, inclusive of plaintiff's actual damages and defendants' profits, it said. Meanwhile, the estate is asking the court for a cease and desist order enjoining defendants, their officers, agents, employees, and those acting in concert with them, preliminarily during the pendency of this action and permanently thereafter, from infringing or contributing to or participating in the infringement by others the copyright in the work, or acting in concert with aiding or abetting others to infringe said copyright in any way, copying, duplicating, selling, licensing, displaying, distributing, preparing derivative works of the work, or otherwise using or exploiting the work, which plaintiff jointly owns without plaintiff's prior written consent or license to do so. Okay, that was all a mouthful of legalese. But to answer your question, John, do I think that this lawsuit has any weight to it? Sure. It's from the original owners of, like, the Superman estate. Do I think this is going to affect the July 11th release date? No, I don't. And part of the reason I don't is because they can't levy, the lawsuit doesn't include the United States, number one. It also doesn't include China or like other, or Japan or some of the other bigger markets, number two, right? And I'm not saying that Canada and the UK are markets to be ignored, especially not in this day and age with respect to all the other social political stuff that's going on right now in the world. But they're not like on the same level. Like this movie is going to release on July 11th. And if anything, I expect some type of settlement. I expect something, something is going to happen, whether the lawyers get this killed or whether they come to some sort of settlement with the estate. I would say that in our current socio-political climate, that Warner Brothers Discovery probably in a stronger position with respect to deregulation and stuff like this getting thrown out. It just depends on, what happens when it goes for a judge and whether or not a different solution can be levied. Warner Brothers has plenty of lawyers. We know that. I don't expect this to affect the release date of Superman. I don't. I really don't. I at the moment, it's an interesting story, and I would be curious to see how it plays out. But no, I don't see the need. No, the idea of them delaying the movie to set, no, I don't believe that's going to happen. I strongly do not believe that is going to happen at all. And I also don't think it would necessarily allow them to make more money if they moved it to December. In fact, I think they'd make less money, truthfully, if they moved it to December. I feel like everything is, all systems go with respect to Warner Brothers Discovery and DC Studios with releasing this in July 11th, and I think they're going to do everything in their power, legally and otherwise, to make certain that that goes off without a hitch in as many territories as possible. And if it means that it doesn't open in Canada or the United Kingdom or Australia, then I think they're going to live with that. I do. So long as it releases here and, in China and in Japan, which I'm pretty sure is still the top three markets with respect to box office releases, they're fine in that regard. I don't think this is going to upheave anything in that regard. If we'll see what happens, but I don't give a whole lot of weight to the idea that this is going to derail anything. I think there's some merit to it, and we'll see where it goes. But I don't think there's a whole lot of weight that's going to like derail the release of this film. I just don't. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that's all of John's emails for this week. Thank you, John, as always, for the feedback. Indeed, greatly appreciated. And again, best of luck to you in your new love life endeavors. All right, next up is an email from an old friend of the show, Rachel Bernatowitz. It's not a watch update email. It's been a minute since she's sent an email in to the show, but it is a brief update, as she puts it. And I wanted to read it here because she sent this, I think, the same day, like right after the last Flight Chat episode, Flight Chat 50, was posted on the 19th of January. So she says, "Hey Ray, I apologize for not having sent any emails since July. At first it was due to work-related stress and falling behind on various things, and then it was because I got caught up in following the Baltimore Ravens again. I even went to two games, the Thursday night game against the Bengals in November and the Saturday night wildcard game against the Steelers last week. Both were amazing experiences. So I wasn't focused on that much else for the past few months," she says. "The last movie I saw was Wicked Part 1, which I really enjoyed, and the last shows I watched were the latest seasons of The Boys and My Adventures with Superman, both of which were also great." No apologies necessary, Rachel. I mean, that's completely understandable. That real life, especially enjoyable stuff like going to football games and a playoff chase. Yeah, that's awesome. But I also feel you on this second paragraph. You said, "I agree with your thoughts on Blue Sky after the Lions game in that I don't care about anything else related to the rest of the season, and it's time to get caught up on media again now that our season is sadly over too." Yep. Uh-huh. Both of us experienced playoff defeat. Rachel, in your case, though, the Ravens at least won a game. They won their wild card game against Pittsburgh before they were dispatched in the following round, in the divisional round, by Buffalo. And it was a closer game in the divisional round that you guys lost to Buffalo than we did at home to the Washington Commanders. Yeah, it was a very, very disappointing and still painful loss to deal with. But yeah, football season's over. I don't even think I'm watching the Super Bowl. I don't. Probably am not. I got to work the next day. Anyway, I'm not taking that day off. I was originally going to if everything went the right way as far as the Super Bowl goes, but I don't need to. I have no desire to really stay up and watch a rematch of Chiefs and Eagles in that regard. I'll find out in the morning who wins and watch highlights if I feel like watching them. It is what it is. But anyway, she says at the top of her list as far as getting caught up right now is Invincible. Oh, I think I have 2 episodes left to watch in season 2, she says, and season 3 comes out soon, so she's making that a priority? Oh, man. Well, that means I'm a full season behind, and I'm about to be 2 seasons behind once season 3 comes out. I haven't even thought about the Amazon stuff, because as far as Amazon goes, there's Invincible, There's The Boys, which I still need to. I never finished season 3. I did not watch Gen V, and I still got season 4 to watch. And somehow I have stayed largely in the bubble on all of it. I don't know how, but I mean, thank the maker I've been able to do that. But yeah, oy vey. She says, I also have volume 3 of the Invincible Comic Books Compendium, which I picked up at Baltimore Comic Con in September, she says. So I would like to read that too, since I read volumes 1 and 2 last year. She's also got Batman Cape Crusader, Agatha All Along, Skeleton Crew, and Creature Commandos are probably next in that order, she says. I also want to make time for finishing the Dark Knight trilogy so I can finally get to Batman Beyond as promised before. Anyway, looking forward to getting back into TV, movies, and other assorted media. I'm especially looking forward to Superman. I watched the trailer when it came out, and I'm hoping it'll be a great live action beginning of James Gunn's DC Universe. Take care, Rachel. Well, Rachel, it sounds like you have just as much to get caught up on as I do. All of those shows that you listed, except for Batman Cape Crusader, I need to get caught up on. I haven't seen Agatha All Along, I haven't seen Skeleton Crew, and I haven't even seen Creature Commandos yet. So I got to watch all of that. Plus, you mentioned Invincible. I talked about The Boys and Gen V as well. So yeah, we've got a good amount of catch up. And since football season is over for the both of us a little bit early, we can totally do that for sure. So yeah, definitely looking forward to getting back into TV's movie and other assorted media. Looking forward to your updates, and I echo your sentiments about Superman. And I'm also hoping that it'll be a great live action beginning of James Gunn's DC universe, despite all of the people, all of the Delulu, just entitled, selfish fans that want to wish, defeat on it right from the outset for whatever selfish reasons they have. Whatever, screw them. It is what it is. It's all subjective. But thank you so much for sending in an email, Rachel. Good to catch up with you. Thank you for the update. Looking forward to more of your emails in the not too distant future. Welcome back. All right, people, get comfortable, break out the popcorn, get in your recliner. It is time for another email missive via Digital Raven from Mr. Anthony Dorsey. You know these aren't short. This one is titled Flight Chat 17. You said the age of heroes would never come again. It will. It has to. Ah, yes. Diana and Bruce from Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ah, what a fantastic, exceptional film. The best that the shared cinematic universe comic book movies has to offer to date, in my humble opinion. You can agree or disagree with that as much as you like. But thank you for quoting that, Mr. Dorsey. Let us dive in to your most recent email missive. He says, Hello there, and Happy New Year. Disclaimer, the first half of this email missive was written in November, December, and the second half was after the new year. I just added it to the longer your hiatus went on. Okay, no problem. So we're covering a couple of bases here with respect to the last couple of months. All right. So we started off by saying, here we are again with another email missive in a changed world. I know we all needed a bit of a break post-election loss. It truly was devastating. I can't say I was surprised by the result, as I was starting to think a lot of the excitement from our side was an echo chamber, and it seems that might have been the case, though I don't doubt that Musk might have influenced the vote as to be as decisive as it was. Then he puts in, edit, there's no way that F-Face didn't hack the vote so they'd win. I don't want to go into this more here, but this loss certainly shows there are more stupid and terrible people out there than we wish. Maybe it won't be as bad as we fear, but we should all still prepare for the worst and hope for the best. All right. This is all I'm going to say, Anthony, because I don't dive headfirst into politics, but I don't shy away from politics either. But here's all I'll say. No, I don't think he hacked. I don't. I do not believe that. I don't. What I believe is the last part of what you said, as far as more stupid and terrible people out there than we wish. People, emphasis on stupid. I mean, there are enough terrible people in the world, but stupid people for sure, definitely. And unfortunately, those people effed around, and all of us are going to find out. And we already have, unfortunately, within the first couple of weeks of this horrific presidency. But all I will say is survive. Survive. And with respect to, what you were talking about, the echo chamber in terms of the excitement from our side, well, I tell you what, if you pay any attention to the stuff that I've been reposting on Blue Sky, you'll see exactly where my position is, and with respect to that. And John, you might want to take note of it as well, because my position has changed a bit. I realize something about myself with respect to all of that, and just in a nutshell, Anthony and John, if you're listening to this part of the show, this election taught me that I am not really a liberal, and I'm definitely a progressive. I'll put it that way. I am much more a progressive than I am a liberal in that regard, as far as my beliefs and as far as what I think should be happening right now in response to all this crazy batshit stuff going on, and the more that is to come, as opposed to what is actually happening in that regard. So I will leave the rest of that discussion on Blue Sky because I don't wish to delve hot and heavy into politics. But you brought it up, and like you said, this is from one of your older emails that you combined to this, so that's as much as I will say about it here. We can talk about it elsewhere. But let's move on back to the movies, TV, and other assorted media. Although, hang on, he has a little bit more here. He said, I was sad to see you leave Threads, but I understand your reasoning. I might jump ship from there soon enough, but I don't yet like Blue Sky that much and feel like it's still missing most of the community that Threads has. And I've seen more toxicity in our fandom on there than I have on Threads post Superman trailer, which I don't discuss in this email, but in short, I liked it. I did find you on Blue Sky easily enough, but to others searching for Ray on there, there's no it's just FLITEcast. I guess you took the advice of Justin Timberlake from the social network there. If anyone wants to find me on Threads, I'm at AJ Dorsey Films and the same on Blue Sky, but with .bsky.social at the end. A little bit, as far as like the whole taking the off the end of it, a little bit in that regard. But, I also saw, not to, I forget how long ago it was, Anthony, you said that you saw like some political stuff, like some MAGA stuff pop up on your Blue Sky feed, and you don't know how that happened. And I still haven't run into that. I have not. And as far as the fan toxicity that you're talking about, I've seen some of it, but you're never going to get rid of all of it. Truthfully, there's always going to be people, especially people that may agree with us politically, are still going to think that Zack Snyder is the root of all evil with respect to what he did to DC, right? And think that James Gunn is the savior and da 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 da. And Superman should smile more. They're going to be people that are going to agree with us in social political terms and completely hardcore toxically disagree with us in comic book movie terms. That's a thing, right? So those people, I've blocked plenty of people on Blue Sky, and I will continue to. It's like no other social media network in that regard. But as far as stuff that I find, that pops up, no, it's light years better in terms of the algorithm, right? It's not a manipulated algorithm like both Threads and X are, at least not to the same level and not for the same intentions as those, particular platforms are. And here, I'll tell you what, I will say one last potentially politically charged thing for you, Anthony, and I will tell you that I have seen personally certain political accounts that I wasn't following that, Meta decided I should follow. Whether, because like I said, the Facebook is still up because I still have the Facebook page. For now, I may end that, seriously. I may end the Facebook stuff pretty quick here. I don't know. But it decided that I should be following certain political accounts from, 47 and otherwise, and that I didn't need to be following, AOC or Jasmine Crockett or others. And other people have found this as well within like the Meta products and certainly on X in that regard. So I tell you what, Anthony, you do what you will. You want to stay on Threads, that is your business. I'm never going back. I'm never going back there, and I certainly am never going back to X. So, whatever issues you're having on Blue Sky, that's your business. I feel like it is still so much better and so much less manipulative than Threads is in that regard. So, yeah, we'll not be going back. And Blue Sky just hit 30 plus million subscribers and over a billion posts, so it only continues to grow in that regard. So, that's as much as I will say with respect to that. But here, let's get to the meat of your email. We've already talked a good bit about your political leanings here. You said, before diving in, I recently edited my top movies of 2024 into a list video and would appreciate if you checked it out. It's about 6.5 minutes. All right, hang on one moment here. Oh, it says unavailable. It says that it was removed by the user, so I don't know if you did that, Anthony, or not, but sorry, I did not get to this soon enough to be able to see that video before it was pulled. But here, let's continue on. You said, now on to other less real and bleak stuff. All right, so some movie reviews. All right, how about this? Double Indemnity, 1944. Ah, Fred McMurray, yes. A classic noir film where an insurance agent conspires with a femme fatale to kill her husband and rake in the insurance money. Of course, things don't go as planned. For its time, I thought this was a pretty solid movie despite making use of a trope I generally don't care for, where the movie opens with the main character shot and then he recounts the events of the film as a narrator, so the whole movie you're just waiting to see how he gets shot. I found that forgivable since the film is from 1944 and could very well be the first use of that narrative device. It was slow paced by today's standards, but still pretty good 7 out of 10. I Good review, although I could have done without you identifying what the device was at the beginning because I haven't watched that movie yet, but I have it in my possession, ready to watch. I'll just put it that way. This had to do with one of the Criterion sales that happened last year. I snagged the 4K copy when it came out, and I have never watched it. It's a pure blind buy, but definitely one that is on my list. So I will watch it at some point and probably do a flight review episode on it. Probably for Patreon if I had to venture a guess. But at any rate, all right, 7 out of 10. Fair enough. Next, We Live in Time, 2024, an incredibly emotional love story starring Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh, told out of chronological order by intersplicing scenes from the beginning, middle, and end of the relationship, allowing us to see all the great moments and hardships that happened to them at those different points in time, from simple communication issues or secrets coming out to long-term illness. One of the best films of the year, 9 out of 10. I've been curious about that because I like Garfield. I do like Florence Pugh. Um, I don't know how far up on the list that one is, but that is one that I will watch eventually at some point. All right. That's a very glowing review with respect to that. All right, here we go. Let's get into a spoiler review. Venom The Last Dance. This is one that I did do a flight review episode on last year. This is spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen it, anybody that cares about spoilers for it. He says, now, in contrast to that last movie I just talked about, here's one of the worst movies I saw this year. Oh, all right, here we go. Buckle up. Anthony says, now, I'm not one with a lot of history with Venom as a character. I read maybe one volume of the Donny Cates Venom run, which inspired this movie, since it introduced Null. But that was years ago, and I don't remember specifics, he says. I've also seen some Spider Man animated series that feature the character, but I've learned to ignore that going into this trilogy, considering their deliberate lack of Spider Man from the beginning. I don't think Sony needs to give the rights back to Marvel, but I do think they need someone else shepherding this shared universe. I thought the first Venom was quite a lot of fun. The second was less good, but I still mostly enjoyed it. Morbius was bad, but veered into so bad it's good territory, and I still haven't seen Madam Web, but don't expect that to improve my view of this Sonyverse. No, it won't. If you're already this negative about it, no, it's not going to help you. The Last Dance, he said, for me, focused entirely on all the elements of the first two movies that I didn't like, while also poorly trying to set up a big bad for their universe. The humor mostly didn't work for me, and the plot barely makes sense, with Eddie and Venom making consistently bad choices throughout, from trying to go to New York City to bribe a judge, to dancing with Mrs. Chen as Venom after explicitly saying that fully turning into Venom will have that xenophobe know where they are instantly. I fear that Eddie, Brock, and Venom had all their sense and brain cells diminished between movies, as I don't remember them being this bumbling to dumb in the first two movies. Some jokes I did find funny, and the action towards the end was decent, but most of the symbioses we see don't even get named, nor do the people they bond with. I don't want to go on here, so I'll just say that I didn't like this movie even in a so bad it's good way. It's currently ranked just above Superman 3 at number 114 of my full comic book ranking on Letterboxd, which currently has 118 movies on it. Take a guess what's 118. 4 out of 10. Okay, it's all subjective. I'm not going to tear into your review, even though I categorically disagree with just about everything you flippin' said, but I'm going to leave it where it is. You know, I don't go into these movies, especially the Sony movies, quite as seriously as all that. And this is somebody that, you know, I like the Venom movies personally, and I like what Sony does in many ways because it's not what the MCU does. It's not what DC does, right? I'm looking for something that's just a bit of a decompression, if you will. And I get that with those movies. And they're not the best of movies. They're not. But I own all three of the Venoms because my steelbook for The Last Dance came in a week ago. I own Madam Web. I don't own Morbius yet, but I will. I just have to locate it in that regard. And I will own Craven. Most certainly I will. And if I'm missing any in there, I'll make certain I get those too. Because the Sony Spider-Man Universe movies, no, I don't have them that low. Yeah, I have an idea of what is 118 for you, and it certainly would not be my 118 if I was ranking that many. 100. 18 comic book movies. That's interesting. That's like an all-time ranking. That goes beyond the shared cinematic universe realm. That is for sure. But yeah, I imagine if I looked at your letterbox, Anthony, we would have a lot of disagreements. I foresee that being the case. But either way, you know what? Look, if I'm on an island with it, that's fine. All I will say is that when it comes to the Venom films, that's one where, for all the fans that don't like it, for all of the diehard like Marvel and comic book fans that don't necessarily care for that movie or The Last Dance, it is something that it's a poster child for what I talk about in terms of the general audience not caring nearly as much as we do with respect to these films. And this is one of the only times that I would ever bring up like box office in that regard, because Venom: The Last Dance, I mean, the first Venom movie made over $800 million, right? And then Let There Be Carnage, which came out in that weird 2021 where we were kind of still in pandemic mode. It still made 506 million worldwide. Let There Be Carnage did. Venom: The Last Dance drew in 478.7 million. And that's not a great number by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure if we compare it to the MCU and even to DC stronger films, it could be looked at by many fans as a failure. But the fact that you had that many people see that movie, I mean, this has got to be more than Craven, right? Like what Craven do? Let's see, what was Craven's box office? Uh, Craven's final box office. Oh yeah, Craven made 61.5 million. Okay, so that's Craven, and then Madam Web, which again, part of me still is shocked that they made a steelbook for that, especially since the steelbook itself doesn't really correspond to any of the shit that happened in the movie. But yeah, Madam Web, 100.4 million, right? So those movies, I mean, don't even come close to Venom numbers, right? Venom is clearly the strongest of those, like the franchise. It's the only one that's made over $1 billion, right? And they did it without direct connections to Spider-Man. So clearly there is something there that the general audience enjoys on some level to push it there, which is why, me personally, I do not put it as low as you would have it. But again, it's all subjective. It is what it is. I just use it as an example to say, hey, this is where, we need to stop acting like the general audience cares about these films the same way that we do, because clearly they do not. Certain things they like, other things they don't. It is what it is. So, anyway, okay, I'm a little scared about this one because it's Futurama season 12, and you said light spoilers. I don't know about light spoilers, man. Okay, I'm going to trudge this with caution. He says after season 11, which I also haven't watched, had about even hits and misses. He says, I felt this season was much more solid with every episode being at least pretty good. They've still got plenty of clever humor and storylines throughout, and only a few jumping on current-ish trends like NFTs and Squid Game. They even try to hit some of those emotions of Fry's past like they did in the one about his brother way back. And while I thought the episode was good, the emotional climax was not as good as that, nor the famous dog episode, Jurassic Park. But those are very high bars. Like last season, they also have an anthology episode, but this one was much better and had a great through line of a certain famous Trek actor reading mystery literature inspired stories. They also played on the iconic time loop finale, which I thought was a perfect end, cleverly, for this season's finale. There were some other standouts too, but I wouldn't say there are any series' best episodes yet in this revival. I'd say my favorite ones were Otherwise, Cuteness Overload, and The Temp. 7.5 out of 10. Okay, all right, we got through it. As far as spoilers are concerned, that was all right. That was okay. Nothing specific in that regard because I love Futurama. I just have not got caught up on the Hulu seasons yet. The list grows. My goodness, got to figure that one out. All right. Next up, Slow Horses, seasons 1 through 4. No spoilers. Okay, I like no spoilers. How about this? He says yet another show that puts Apple TV Plus as the best streaming service, he subjectively believes. Starring Gary Oldman and Jack Lowden, this spy show is like a mix of James Bond and Mission Impossible if the main team was a group of misfits and burnouts who screwed up in some way at MI5. Gary Oldman's Jackson Lamb leads this team of F-ups in a way that you're never quite sure if his goal is to let them F-up even more or quit if he secretly degrades them for them to improve. The one thing that isn't a secret is that he is constantly degrading them. Season 1 has them trying to save a Muslim student who was kidnapped by white supremacists, and the second season has them up against Russian sleeper agents. Season 3 has an agent being kidnapped to reveal a cover-up, and Season 4 has Hugo Weaving as the villain. Enough said. This show is very well acted and paced with only 6 episodes per season, but unlike the MCU 6-episode shows, this show has the benefit of knowing it's a multi-season show, so there are several long-term plot lines set up for future payoff. The writing is extremely clever, especially in the dialogue, and both season arcs went in very unexpected places. Easily one of the best current streaming shows. 10 out of 10. Yeah, nice, not so subtle shot at MCU 6-episode structure. You are entitled to feel how you wish with respect to that. It's all subjective. Let's move on to Kite Man. Hell yeah, season 1. No spoilers, good grief, Kite Man. Yes, just a brief aside, I was reminded not too recently that Harley Quinn apparently has continued on and is in season 5, and it's like, when was the last episode of that I watched? Yeah, end of season 2. Okay, my God, there's too much shit to watch. There is too much shit to watch. But anyway, that's my own personal frustration. Kite Man, hell yeah, season 1. Anthony says this show was a much better than expected spinoff of Harley Quinn, with great and unexpected uses of the DC IP. Even more villain focused than Harley Quinn, Kite Man, Matt Oberg, and his girlfriend, Golden Glider, Stephanie Shu, buy the villain pub and deal with problems such as a competing chain restaurant across the street, a time-traveling toilet, a sexiest villain alive competition, and hiding the anti-life equation from the ruler of Apocalypse himself, Darkseid, played by Keith David. Several characters from Harley Quinn like Clayface, Poison Ivy, and Harley herself cameo, with Bane being a series regular. Lex Luthor also plays a larger role in the show this time, played by the late great Lance Reddick, with another actor taking over for him towards the end. If you're a fan of and caught up on Harley Quinn, then you'll have a great time with this show and its wild supporting cast, but also its great leads as we follow the relationship through its insane hurdles. 8 out of 10. I feel like there were a couple of spoilers in there with respect to details about what happens in episodes, but it is what it is. I'm very behind. It is what it is. All right, we'll figure this out. Good grief. Agatha all along. No spoilers. Okay. Yeah, this is one of the MCU shows that I am behind on. When the hell am I going to get caught up on this shit? I don't know. But he says another unexpectedly great spin-off show. I didn't have much hope or expectations for this going in as ever since it was announced. It seemed like it only existed because the titular song from WandaVision went viral. In the end, the show following Agatha and her coven's journey down the Witch's Road was both compelling television but also had an even catchier song. The journey is filled with twists and turns, with some reveals being a bit predictable or even spoiled ahead of time thanks to people sharing a leaked Funko Pop. Other reveals were quite surprising, and one even being very touching and emotional. The origin of the song was tear-inducing. Unlike WandaVision, which I felt had a boring beginning, great middle, and a mixed bag of an ending, Agatha All Along had a solid beginning, an okay middle, and a fantastic ending, which recontextualized the entire show in the best way. This show was so different from other MCU shows and was all the better for it. It told a very personal story, he says, without world-ending stakes about all about this group of women and one teen boy dealing with their traumas and what they desire. I did feel like a couple of members of the group could have used some flashbacks, as when we do get significant flashbacks for the other characters, it's all extremely well done, and a few of those middle episodes could have used that to differentiate them more from each other. This wasn't my favorite MCU show, but it is second behind Loki and at 14 in my overall MCU ranking out of 47, because despite some issues and missed opportunities in the final episodes were so good, it shot up in my rankings, especially since the MCU shows tend to have weaker finales than the rest of the show. 8.5 out of 10. All right. Okay, so he thinks rather highly of Agatha All Along, and personally, I still don't like the title. I still think Agatha House of Harkness would have been a better title. I suppose perhaps when I watch the show, I'll see why they fit it that way, but just from an aesthetic standpoint, I still don't like Agatha All Along as the title. I think it's a stupid title. That's just my own subjective opinion. It is what it is. But he then says, I took a break for the holidays between what I previously wrote and this next section. Hopefully it'll be shorter. Doubtful. Nope, this doesn't look any shorter, Anthony. Let's just keep plugging away. Life is Strange Double Exposure. Video games. Here we go. He says, I was looking forward to this game as a big fan of this series, especially with this being the return of Max Caulfield, the protagonist of the original game. And while some pre-release controversy hurt the experience a bit, I took that in stride to see what new story this creative team had in store, he says. In short, they did a decent job, but it could have been better. Some plot elements and characters were very exciting and interesting, while others felt underdeveloped. They also end the game in a way that makes it clear they are beginning a multi-part story for the first time with Max at the center, and that's intriguing, but certainly not as much as it would have been if the original creators were still involved. They're busy with Lost Records, which I'm still looking forward to, he says. 7.5 out of 10. Okay. All right. I have not played that, but you've talked about Life is Strange before. Here we go with another show review. Only Murders in the Building Season 4. Yeah, I've not seen any of this show. A solid Hollywood-themed season with emotional moments, tons of humor and cameos, and some great classic film references, he says. The mystery this season was good, but overall, I'd say this was one of their weaker seasons yet. 7 out of 10. Okay. You are a harsh reviewer at times. You're very quite critical, Anthony. But again, it is all subjective. How about this? The Penguin. Oh, yeah. If I didn't have such a long email already, I'd write more. But I echo others' thoughts on this show being an incredible miniseries with stellar performances all around, he says. Probably one of the highest quality live action comic book shows up there for me, with the likes of Daredevil, Loki, and Watchmen. Colin Farrell just won a well deserved Golden Globe for his performance, while Kristen Milioti was robbed. A nearly flawless show. Too bad any sort of follow up is still years away. 9.5 out of 10. Yeah, I'm patient. I don't have to keep looking at my shelf of Batman content to the right of me to display how patient I am, but I am quite patient. Whenever it's ready is when I'll watch it. Just let me know. Plain and simple, because it's Batman. And Batman I show up for, no doubt. All right, continuing on. Gladiator 2. Only 2 sentences for this one. He says a good legacy sequel that retreads a bit of the original before taking things a step further in an interesting way. Doesn't quite match up to the original, but still works on its own or as a follow-up. 8 out of 10. I know at least one person at my job that thinks this film is superior to the first one because the first one bored them, and they said this one did not. So, intriguing. I will watch it at some point. Arcane Season 2. Yes, because Anthony is a big Arcane fan. He says an incredible second and final season with groundbreaking animation and a killer soundtrack, full of original songs made for the show with the likes of Linkin Park, Wooded, and 21 Pilots, delivering a great range of songs from emotional to epic, rap to ballad, and even some songs in other languages. The 3 arcs that make up this 9-episode season do feel quicker paced than we got in season 1, and I wish they had some more time to develop certain characters and plots, such as Echo, who gets possibly the best episode of the show focused on him, but most of his previous development in the show happened off screen or in deleted scenes, which is unfortunate. Okay. I'm excited for whatever spin offs and sequel shows they might have in store, as it's very obvious that these League adaptations only started with Arcane. 9.5 out of 10. All right. So those are his thoughts on Arcane. Wicked. He did see Wicked. He said, I saw the play locally years back, but I only vaguely remembered it before seeing this movie, which adapts only the first half of the play. For what it is, I thought it was fantastic with great music and visually stunning set and production design, as well as seamless Vex throughout. He must mean VFX. Autocorrect, I think, got him on that one too. If you're a fan of musicals and or The Wizard of Oz, you'll love it. 9 out of 10. I'm thinking about it because I am a fan of The Wizard of Oz, but I'm thinking about it. I don't know yet. We'll get to that point at some down the road, perhaps. Superman and Lois season 4. He says you and Scott already discussed this show at length, so I'll be brief. By the way, yes, we did. That was our last episode of DCTV Squadcast that we did over at Squadcast Media. We talked about Superman and Lois season 4. He says, I loved this show throughout its run and thought this was a great final season and send out to DC on the CW as a whole with an absolute tearjerker of a final scene. I would say I preferred season 3 because it did such a good job with Lois's cancer storyline. 9 out of 10. Yeah, I also, that was just briefly, that was one of my thoughts on Superman and Lois was I thought season 3 was better than season 4. Season 4 was good, was quite good, and I agree with you in terms of how emotional the ending was. But yeah, structurally speaking, as far as, what they did with storylines, I thought that season 3 was utterly phenomenal with what they did. I really liked a lot of what they did in that season. All right, a few more reviews to go from Mr. Dorsey here. Sonic 3. He says, I'm not a Sonic fan, but my friend Nick is. And sitting next to him during this movie, it felt like his Super Bowl for the year. I had a lot of fun with it. It's hilarious with good action and both clever and dumb humor throughout. Keanu did a good job as Shadow, but don't expect him to do anything but his usual voice. 8 out of 10. Well, that's Keanu. Keanu is Keanu. He does what he does. If you're going to cast him in a movie, you're casting him for what he does. Period. So, that's why he works as Neo in The Matrix. That's why he works as Ted Theodore Logan in Bill and Ted. That's why he works as John Wick, right? So, yeah. Anybody expecting him to do anything other than his usual voice doesn't understand Keanu Reeves, in my humble opinion. Let's see. How about this? A complete unknown. The Bob Dylan movie. I don't typically listen to Bob Dylan or his genre of music, he says, but as a movie, I thought this movie was quite good. Timothy Chalamet put in yet another great performance this year, showcasing his range going from Wonka to Dune to now this with a vastly different performance each time, 8 out of 10. Yeah, I've seen Dune, obviously, thoroughly enjoyed both films, still need to watch Wonka. And this is on a list somewhere with musical biopics. I don't know. Like, I feel like I had this along with like Bohemian Rhapsody and maybe, the Johnny Cash biopic. I don't know. I still haven't seen that either. But either way, continuing on with respect to that. So, good review for that particular film. Creature Commandos Season 1. Anthony says, I enjoyed this show, but for me, this wasn't the start of a new connected universe that I would have picked, as it very much seems like that was an afterthought for a show that feels designed to be in the late DCEU with explicit references to Guns, the Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker. We already assumed those were going to be canon, but it's clear with this show that there's no doubt about it. I don't find this confusing since I pay attention to this stuff. It's just something that stuck out to me during this show. As for the show itself, simply, I liked the backstory segments for each character, but found the present day main plot to be a bit lackluster with a bit of an underdeveloped climax. It also seemed a bit cynical of the show to punish the only good or innocent characters for the character development of other monstrous characters. Anyway, if you want a great R-rated DC show, watch Harley Quinn or Kite Man, 7 out of 10. Personally, even though I haven't dove into Creature Commandos yet, I feel like we have overblown this whole start of the DCU, launch of the DCU shit. Seriously, like I'm so done with that. To be honest with you, as far as people harping on that, it's a soft open, and not really made for the general audience. To be honest with you, well then why would they do it? Because it's for fans. Because he wanted to do that project, and it's part of this whole idea of him building synergy between animated projects and live action projects in the universe going forward. So I don't really give a shit that it's an afterthought, to be honest with you. That's just me personally. And he's already talked about, I mentioned this in the other recently on Flightcast, about what he's talked about in terms of it being an imperfect memory of the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker season 1, right? So, it'll make, I'm sure the show makes direct references to that. Sure, makes sense, whatever, but it is what it is. As far as it being the start of a new connected universe, okay. We know the real start is Superman. We know that's what most of us are going to be paying attention to in that regard. And those of us that have seen Creature Commandos, by the time Superman comes out, we'll start connecting some dots there between those shows. But I just think it's really overblown, this whole thing with fans talking about why would you start with Creature Commandos? Ed, whatever. It is what it is. I'm putting that in the back burner. I'll get to Creature Commandos and my thoughts on it when I watch it. It is what it is. Whatever. But let's see. Skeleton Crew. Very quickly, with no spoilers, he says, I loved this show. Great kid-centered show with personal stakes, intriguing mysteries, and twists, and great acting from its 4 kid leads, Jude Law and Nick Frost as SM-33. This show should be great for Star Wars fans of all ages, whether you've seen every movie and show and read every book, or this is your first ever Star Wars thing, 9 out of 10. Okay. All right, so glowing review for Skeleton Crew. And he says, so ends my first novel-length email of the year. At the time of writing, you hadn't done a flight chat for a bit, so I don't know when you'll read it. I'm reading it now. But whenever you do, just know that I appreciate it and hope that you have a great 2025. And hopefully this will be my year for finally furthering my career, Anthony J. Dorsey. Yes, indeed. Hopefully, in spite of all of the gloomy shit that we were talking about at the beginning of your email, 2025 does turn out to be a better year for a number of us than, perhaps it will be for many of us in that regard, right? Those of us that can find positivity, those of us that can find a way to be stronger this year, hopefully we can make that happen. Hopefully we can find success and happiness in this year. Hopefully all of us listening to this show can. Hopefully, I cross your fingers, and hope that we can all, find ourselves in that position. But yeah, it's going to be a tough year in some spots and hopefully a joyous and furthering year in others for sure. But thank you for the email, Anthony. Like I said, every other week. That's the schedule that we're going to try and adhere to here with respect to Flight Chat. Every other week for feedback. So just bear that in mind when sending in your email missives in novel form, if you will. Good sir. All right, next up, we welcome the return of Waliyu Mustafa to the Flight Check feedback circle. This is his first email of 2025, which he titled, "Hello, boys, I'm back." That is, of course, Randy Quaid's character. What was his name? I'm trying to remember. He was the crop duster. Russell Case, that's right. His name was Russell Case. The crop duster from Independence Day. The one who had the kids. The one of them was the daughter from Mrs. Doubtfire, but they were in the RV, and he believed, he believed he'd been abducted by the aliens and was part of the controversy, and then made the noble sacrifice at the end, and that was literally the last line of the movie for him as he plunged his fighter jet into the alien weapon that destroyed the alien craft carrier, the City Killer, if you will, the City Destroyer that was hovering over Area 51. Man, a classic film that I have not seen in quite some time, but I don't need to rewatch it. I know that movie very, very well. But at any rate, Waliyu quoting that for his title, let's get into the bulk of his email here for 2025. He says, "Hey Ray, I know it's the last day of January. Thank goodness that's when he sent this, on Friday. But let me still say Happy New Year to you. I can't remember the last email I sent to you, but a fair amount has happened since then. Let me get the big news out of the way," he says. "My partner and I welcomed our new baby girl on the 4th of November. Her name is Estelle, and she weighed 8 pounds 6 ounces. Wow, that's how much I weighed when I was born. How about that?" He says she'll be 3 months old by the 4th of February, and she's already developing at a faster rate than Micah did. Our family is now complete, and we definitely won't be having any more children, lol. Oh, and speaking of Micah, he turns 2 on February 3rd. Can't believe that's come around quick, but he's doing so well in nursery, he will be in the next class starting Tuesday, February 4th. I've attached a few pics as well and a video of Estelle practically talking. Yes, those pictures are adorable. That video is adorable. Yes, your family is adorable. Absolutely 100% adorable. Congratulations to you and your partner on that, Wally. The family is indeed complete. He says, "My partner Charlie and I also celebrated 10 years of being together on the 26th of November. The cards we got each other were almost similar in that we both agreed she hadn't killed me in that time and that she would get less for murder, lol. It was nice, and we went out to a posh restaurant of her choice and took Estelle with us." All right, good deal, good deal. Nice family gathering for sure. He says, "Now on to the Superman DCU stuff. Not sure if you saw, but I recorded a trailer reaction video on YouTube when the teaser trailer for Superman came out. We spoke briefly about it on Blue Sky, especially the gatekeepers and their reactions to it. Some saying it's already a better movie than Man of Steel simply because of the brighter colors, crypto, and the inclusion of the John Williams theme. Yet they missed the part where David Superman doesn't even smile in this teaser trailer. Fans, yes, that's right. David Cornsweet does not smile. Not in that new trailer, and he gets like a canned good thrown at the back of his head, and he broods way more in that trailer than Henry Cavill did in just about all of Man of Steel and all of BVS. But whatever, who is really counting? Wally says, "As for the TV spot, speaking of WB, have said there won't be a spot for the Super Bowl apparently, or I think it was James who said it. Can't remember. Oh, really? No Super Bowl spot. That's no good, in my opinion." But he says, "Seeing David in Flight did remind me a bit of Man of Steel, but you are right in that it is more similar to Adam Warlock from Guardians Volume 3. And look, we got a hint of a smile from him. He smiled, because Superman never once smiled in Man of Steel. I'm willing to call it a hint of a smile. It's certainly not nearly... I mean, come on. Cavill at least gave us teeth, right? He gave us a big, huge, teethy smile multiple times in Man of Steel. He laughs in Man of Steel. Like, seriously. We have seen more joy from Superman in like Man of Steel and in BVS than we have so far in a trailer and a TV spot for David Cornsweet Superman. And that is nothing against David Cornsweet. This has nothing to do with him or how James Gunn is approaching it. It has everything to do with how fickle and stupid fans are with respect to their expectations on how Superman should be hopeful and he should do this and he should do that and he shouldn't root all the time. Yeah, well, right now your poster boy for what you think is going to blow Man of Steel out of the water has yet to smile anywhere near the amount that Cavill's version did in his movie. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But he says, anyway, I've watched Creature Commandos and it was a wild ride. My favorite character is the Bride, followed closely by G.I. Robot. Oh, and be prepared to have your heartstrings tugged when you get to the Weasel-centric episode. Overall, it was a great soft introduction to the DCU, and I'm looking forward to seeing these characters as time goes on. In fact, James says Season 2 is currently in development, so they are not wasting any time. Well, that is definitely a more glowing review of Creature Commandos than we got from Anthony Wallyu. So, all right. Thank you for that. Definitely got to watch that pretty soon. He says, I plan to watch Section 31 soon, and I will listen to your review when I have done so. Not surprised by the gatekeepers trashing it because they will never be happy, but I am looking forward to seeing more Michelle Yeoh on screen. The final season of Lower Decks delivered, by the way, and it was a lot of fun. So glad that show exists. Yep, a little bit of Star Trek there. Absolutely echo both of those sentiments. And just so people are aware, both of those steelbooks, the complete series of Lower Decks and Section 31 steelbook, are both pre-ordered. I will have them both in my collection, and I will put them right next to my original series steelbooks, my Star Trek Picard Legacy, and my complete series of Star Trek Discovery. For all of the Trek gatekeepers that, still want to push my buttons and act like, new Trek isn't real Trek. Yeah, it objectively is in that regard. Shut the hell up. But they can feel however they want to about it, whatever. It'll still remain Star Trek, no matter how much they subjectively dislike it. But continuing on with Wallyu's email, he says, we finally watched Venom The Last Dance. I have to say it was the weaker of the trilogy, but it served its purpose in closing out the franchise. It was a great addition to Sony's universe of Spider-Man characters. Not yet watched Kraven the Hunter, but it is on my list. Yeah, is it weaker than Venom Let There Be Carnage? Yeah, probably. I'd probably go 1, 2, 3 in order. I think I said that in my review. I don't remember if I did or not, but yeah, I mean, again, I have different expectations, and there are definitely more enjoyable parts of the Venom films that I have, and I think maybe you have, Wally, than a number of others do. We'll go ahead and agree on that one for sure. He said, like you, I also forgot that the 5th season of Harley Quinn has started, so need to get on that soon. Oh, may I recommend something? Secret Level on Amazon Prime Video, he says. It's an anthology series where each episode is a story from a gaming franchise. They include Pac-Man, as like some kind of horror, and Warhammer 40K, to name a few. There's one episode that features Arnold Schwarzenegger voicing a pirate. The animation is just sublime. It's done by a company called Blur Studios, and their work is excellent. Check it out. All right, add that to the Amazon list. Good Lord. He says, you probably also didn't realize, and this one kind of snuck up out of nowhere, but the new Marvel animated Spider-Man is now on Disney Plus, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and it opened with 2 episodes, and so far I am impressed with it. Love the animation style of it. Has a mix of Jack Kirby and John Romita Sr. Yeah, sadly, Wally, I didn't find out about it until the lead voice actor for Spider-Man made that stupid comment about him being afraid that it was going to be woke, and him being pleasantly surprised that it wasn't. When I saw that about a week ago, I was like, oh, well, that's a shame. Not that I'm never going to watch the show, but not in a hurry. I have other things that obviously are further up on the list, certainly in the comic book realm with respect to that. I need to get caught up on MCU shows. I haven't even watched What If, right? What If has like multiple seasons. I've watched none of it to this point, so yeah, there's a lot more that I got to get caught up on, but I'll pencil that in lightly at the bottom of the list, I suppose. All right. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He says, I saw Sonic the Hedgehog 3 in cinemas, and I know you still have your reason for not seeing any of them, but I thoroughly enjoyed this one, and I hear there's going to be a 4th outing. Didn't think it would be this popular. I hope you do watch them eventually. I think you will enjoy them. I will watch them eventually, yeah, and for people who don't know, the reason that I didn't watch the first Sonic film and have been resistant to jump into them is because I didn't like the bullying with respect to how they got his design changed originally. And I know that there's other reasons behind it, and there were things allegedly that the VFX artists were doing to try and stick it to the studio heads and whatnot who wanted them to go with the original design. Yes, I do agree, subjectively speaking, that the design they went with is better and is closer to what he actually looks like in the games, if you will, and in the cartoons and everything, but still, just the bullying aspect of it, and you know what it is, the fact that people online, the fact that fans online, I even heard this from a TikTok creator, the fact that people are still wearing it as a badge of honor that we bullied the studio into changing the design of Sonic. F you. Seriously. The people that are still like, if you're championing bullying in that regard for subjective purposes, for a movie, yeah, no, go F yourself. In my humble opinion, for people that do that, that champion the bullying of any of these studios. And no, I'm not defending studios, but somebody, I need to dig further into that story, and maybe my animosity towards all of it will go away. I've heard great things. I mean, obviously the movies are doing well. Obviously, they're doing extremely well for them to have now made three, and with a fourth one on the way. Right? They brought Jim Carrey out of retirement. He had retired from acting and decided he was going to do this third Sonic film. Right? So clearly, there's something there. Clearly, they're good films, at least subjectively speaking, from a audience perspective. So at some point, I probably will watch them. It's just that bullying story has never sat right with me. And if anybody, like if you have like the details and you want to send them to me, like, hey, here's what actually happened. Here's why it wasn't actually bullying. Okay. Because I'm just sick and tired of hearing people on social media, like champion themselves. Like, yeah, we bullied them into that. I hate that shit. I hate that shit. So, either way, I'll probably get clarity on it later and figure that out and watch it at some point. But glad that you enjoyed it. I will see what my thoughts are on it eventually when I do watch it after I get past all this bullying shit, allegedly, potentially. So, continuing on, you said tickets are booked to see Captain America Brave New World. We're going on opening day, the 14th of February. My partner chuckled because she said I should be taking her to see the new Bridget Jones movie instead. Yeah, that's not happening. Haha. She knows I love her really, and yes, we're taking Estelle with us. Hopefully, she won't be too loud. Yeah, hopefully she will be. I forget. If I remember correctly, did you think you had said before that you had taken Micah to the theater on a couple occasions and it had worked out okay? I think. Hopefully, it definitely does work out okay with Estelle. We'll see. That's at your discretion. Definitely, that's at any parent's discretion with respect to taking babies and children, young children, into the theater. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, it works out. Hopefully, it definitely works out for all of you in that regard, especially with that film, because that seems like it might be a pretty intense film. But Wally says, one last thing before I sign off. I bought the new Superman costume to wear when I see the movie in July. Had to get it as soon as possible for fear that it might be sold out or take forever to arrive, but it actually arrived sooner than I had expected, and it fits really well, as you can see from the pics. Yes, I did see those pics, and it is, for cosplay, or for what they've designed it for, it does look pretty close to what they've got, the costume looking like from what we've seen in set photos and in these trailers and TV spots so far. He says, can't wait to get it worn for the movie's release. Will be a sweaty mess in it, given that I'll be wearing it in summer. You bet your ass. Do I even care? Not one bit, he says. This is the first time I have bought a complete cosplay costume, and I have to say the quality is really good, and it wasn't that expensive either. Total cost, including the boots, had to be bought separately, and shipping was around 220 pounds, which translates to $270 US, he believes. I tell you, when I first tried it on, it doesn't half make you feel like you could fly. Well, how about that? Now, I'm sure that wearing a Superman costume has definitely got to be empowering, especially for anybody that is a huge, massive Superman fan. I mean, we've heard the actors talk about how they feel when they put it on. How Cavill felt when he put it on. How Reeve and others felt, how Brandon Routh felt when they put it on. Right. So yeah, I get that. I totally get that for sure. He says, well, that'll do for me. Great to have you back, and I look forward to more episodes as always. Give my best to Shonda. Take care, Ray. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Thank you, good sir, for the kind words. I will definitely pass that on to Shonda as well. It is good to be back, and hopefully bring, some joyous conversation about movies, TV, and other assorted media, and some introspective conversation, as always, with respect to fandoms here in the new year, with whatever challenges we have to face. We've still got, for now, our movies, TV, and other assorted media to gorge ourselves on and engage in worthwhile discussion about, good sir. Thank you very much. My best to the family as well on your end. And finally, we'll end this episode of Flight Chat with a pair of emails from Jared Cardos. The first one titled The Main Man, the Devil, the Flash, and More. All right. He says, Hey Ray, hope you're having a good start to the new year. Since your latest Flight Chat popped up as I was writing this, I'll start with a few notes from that. Some news that wasn't talked about, and then your most recent Flightcast episode. He said, John talked about political messaging within Batman v Superman, and I can sort of see where he's coming from in at least one respect. In the scene where Bruce is talking to Alfred about having to take Superman down, he says he has the power to wipe out the entire human race, and if we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, then we have to take it as an absolute certainty, and we have to destroy him. This is partially inspired, he says, by an anecdote told in the book The 1% Doctrine by Ron Susskind, which was about America's military actions after the event of 9/11, wherein then Vice President Dick Cheney says if there's a 1% chance that Pakistani scientists are helping Al Qaeda build or develop a nuclear weapon, we have to treat it as a certainty in terms of our response. It's not about our analysis, it's about our response. It's not a perfect one-to-one comparison between Cheney and Wayne, Jared says, since the former, as criticized in the book, was using tragedy to further his own political goals, and the latter was someone genuinely wrecked by tragedy, became radicalized, and saw the light before it was too late. All that said, while it might be harder to see with recent events, I think Terrio and Snyder went in that direction with Batman for a reason, to show that while it might be tough, it is possible for people to escape the path of hate. Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And that's where, you know, that's why I really like bridle at people that, claim that Zack Snyder's a terrible writer and that all he does is make pretty movies and has nothing to do with story and story is weak and all that. That's bullshit. There's tons of subtext and plenty of character dynamics and a lot of real world applications with respect to characters in his films, and BVS absolutely is a part of that, no doubt about it. It's one of the reasons why, it gets the vitriol that it does, is because I think it is too real for a lot of fans that, don't like it, and they want the escapism and they want to deal with problems that aren't possibly real as far as, what we have to deal with in the real world in that regard. But either way, continuing, he says with Alex's email strings and talking about the music for the Superman trailer and mentioning how other heroes aren't forced to have their 60s iconic music be their only themes. Jared says we actually see a good example of this with the recent MCU Spider-Man films. Michael Giacchino gave Holland's Spider-Man his own theme, but he also added in the music from the 60s animated series as well. Proof that you can indeed give these classic characters whole new beloved themes and still honor their past. Or at least proof that Giacchino can. Maybe he's just built different, as the kids might still say. Also, congrats to Alex and his family for their new addition to the family. Yes, indeed. And yeah, I am definitely holding out hope that John Murphy's theme for David Corenswet's Superman is more like what you just described with Michael Giacchino, no doubt about it. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm not getting my hopes up. But he says, and it's All-Star Superman that Gunn has frequently mentioned the most when talking about inspirations for the upcoming Superman movie, though him and Cornswet have talked about Superman for All Seasons being an inspiration as well. To put it in perspective, DC is releasing a Superman box set in June that includes those two stories as well as Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore and Kurt Swan, as well as Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. Maybe I should read all of them before Superman. Will I have time to do that? We'll find out. Who knows? The list is long, as we all know. Now, on to the recent news, Jared says. He says, first, we should talk about Jason Momoa coming into the DCU as Lobo for Supergirl, pardon me. He wrote it as Superman Woman of Tomorrow, but he meant Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. He said it was something that was talked about a lot during the early days of Gunn Safran starting DC Studios, and I kind of assumed that it was scoopers throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks and fanboy cope, but turns out even the most broken clocks are right twice a day, eventually. As for the news itself, he says, I'm okay with it. Honestly, I've never been a huge fan of Lobo. He can be fun in small doses, like I'm sure he will be in Supergirl. What's interesting about Lobo debuting in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is that he was originally going to be in the book and have a bigger role. Writer Tom King has talked about how a lot of his comic work comes from taking ideas from classic movies and reinterpreting them, and Supergirl was no different. The project was a Supergirl Lobo book that was inspired by True Grit, with Lobo being in the Rooster Cogburn role. But it wasn't really going anywhere. It wasn't until King's editor basically said, Supergirl's been around longer and is cooler than Lobo, why can't she be the Rooster Cogburn character? Then the book really started moving and became the modern classic it's become. So it's funny to see Lobo pop up in some way in the movie. Guess he got to be involved after all. Yeah, I did hear that news. Quite honestly, it wasn't that big of a news to me, Jared. I mean, thank you for bringing it up, and we can talk about it here. But as far as like it being missed, like amongst all the other news, I mean, it is what it is. I'm still definitely more focused on Superman first as opposed to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, but it has started filming, so that is definitely a project that is in production for the DCU. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about Jason Momoa being fan cast as Lobo. It was being thrown out there here and there, and yeah, now Scooper Madness. I guess the grifters can say, well, we were right about that, right? They can hold this up as like something that they were allegedly right about in that regard. But whatever. That is what it is. We'll see how it goes. I Can Jason Momoa play Lobo? Yeah, sure, definitely. But I haven't read the book yet, so I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts with respect to how he'll play it, what it'll be like, and we can guess how he'll look. I'm sure there are plenty of AI drawings and like artist renderings and like fan drawings in terms of like what he's gonna look like as Lobo. But hey, it's cool. It is what it is. He gets to be part of the DCU. I'm not against it. Certainly not against it. So yeah, I think I'm with you. I'm okay with it. Not a massive fan, not like incredibly excited about it, but I'm okay with it in that regard. I'm with you on that. Then he said, then there's the new trailer for Daredevil Born Again, which was really good. Definitely feels in line with the previous Netflix series while also expanding on things like adding in White Tiger. He says, I'm curious to see if this is still 18 episodes like what was initially announced or if that changed when they reworked the series, because I do wonder what the pacing will be like for that long of a series. Like the original seasons, sometimes they felt like they were spinning their wheels sometimes at 13 episodes, but either way, I'm definitely going to be watching it as it comes out. So Jared, I did watch that trailer, and honestly, like when I was talking about like all the other like the last episode I did with respect to news and whatnot, it was DC centric, so I didn't get a chance to dive into that. Like that was kind of like an outlier, if you will. But we're also coming up on that, like pretty soon. Like we are a month away from that particular show. That's March 4th on Disney Plus. The trailer does look good. Trailer does look like those of us that are fans of the Netflix Daredevil series, the 3 seasons of Marvel Netflix there, that we will enjoy what we're seeing here. For me, my biggest question as a fan is I think that the tone, and certainly the characterizations, like, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, and certainly probably Eldon Henson and Deborah Ann Woll and everybody else will be playing their roles the way that they did in the Marvel Netflix era. I have no doubt of that. Like, you can't take that out of them. I've said this before with respect to how certain people play different versions of their characters, because technically these are supposed to be different versions, right? Even though they are treating the rest of it as canon, I think, in that regard. But like, you can't take that performance out of their heads, out of these actors, right? Like Cox is going to play Matt Murdock the way he's always played it. D'Onofrio is going to play Kingpin the way he's always played it, et cetera, down on the line in that regard. So, yeah, it looks great. It looks awesome. I just want to see how it fits, how it all works. Being a part of the MCU in that regard. Will it go as far as the Marvel Netflix shows did? So far, it looks like it's going to. At least based off the trailer, it looks like it's going to. And great, awesome, fantastic. Hopefully that is the case. We will see how that goes. But, I think it would be a good idea for me to personally get caught up. I'm going to take this next month or so to get caught up on as much of the comic book television and movies as I possibly can in that regard before getting to Born Again, because I have a feeling that that's going to be one, the discussion surrounding it is going to be very difficult to avoid spoilers, much more difficult than Agatha All Along and other shows, and Creature Commando certainly. So I'm going to want to watch that one weekly, more than likely. It'd be like the Penguin. It'd be very much like the Penguin in that regard. So we'll see about that. But no, thank you for bringing that one up, because yeah, that was a very good trailer, and I know Brent is hugely excited. My former podcast co-host over at Squadcast Media, that is his most anticipated project of the year. I think even more so than Superman. I think he said that to us in group chats before for sure. So yeah, looking forward to that on March 4th on Disney Plus for sure, definitely. Will be interesting to see what 13 episodes will be for the pacing on that. I know that the people who keep clamoring for longer seasons, they should be happy, right? No, they'll find something to complain about. I know they will, because fans always find something to complain about. But It is what it is. We'll get to it. It's all subjective, no doubt about it. And he says, and finally, for the last couple of episodes, regarding Muschietti and him talking about the reasonings why The Flash failed at the box office, I can definitely see where he's coming from in terms of The Flash just not being a big box office mover at this point. I've seen people try to argue that he is because of some of the memes surrounding him, like "It was me, Barry." But I think those are memes usually circulating in the nerd circles, and even if the casuals use it, who knows where most memes come from? I completely agree with that, Jared. He says, also, I have to ask the people yelling about The Flash flopping, proving it was bad, since when did a movie being a box office success equal being a good movie, especially in nerdy circles? Ask most geeks about the Michael Bay Transformers movies and they'll tell you they're shit. But they made big bank at the box office, so that must mean they're good, right? Meanwhile, both Blade Runner movies flopped hard in theaters, but you tell the cinephiles that the movies are bad because of that, they'll throw a conniption. Preaching to the choir, Jared, you know as well as I do that there is absolutely no equation between how much money a movie makes and how subjectively good or bad it is. And you have brought up excellent examples on either side of it. Transformers movies, huge money makers, geeks hate them. Blade Runner movies, flops in terms of the box office is concerned, but critically acclaimed. We love those films, don't we? Right, absolutely. So the box office equation is it absolutely means shit with respect to The Flash, regardless of what anybody says. It's never meant anything with respect to it being subjectively good or bad in that regard. You're 100% right on that. But Jared does say one possible reason for Flash's underperformance that I'm surprised wasn't mentioned by either you or Muschietti is that there were 9 comic book movies coming out in 2023 in a year where people were feeling the strain financially, so they had to pick and choose what movies they were going to see. Also, it wasn't just the comic book movies that suffered. Unless you were Barbenheimer, you weren't making a billion that year. Even more sure, non-comic book movies like Indiana Jones and Mission Impossible were considered failures at the box office, and comic book movies like Across the Spider-Verse and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 were more successful, so most people just decided to check out those movies and left movies like The Flash, Blue Beetle, and The Marvels for streaming, if that. Jared, I have mentioned that before. I've 100% mentioned that before. I didn't mention that in recently talking about Muschietti's reasons because I was mostly trying to defend the logic behind his reasoning and where he got it from, which is the actual studio metrics that they most certainly told him was the case. But I've absolutely mentioned in the past that 2023 was way overcrowded with respect to those movies. Remember, I've said before, the only 3 movies that really succeeded that year between Marvel, DC, and Sony were Guardians Volume 3, which made like over 860 million. I forget exactly what it was, but I also remember that it was just below the Guardians Volume 2 number, right? But it was still the biggest moneymaker for Marvel that particular year. And then you had Across the Spider-Verse that made over 500 million for Sony, right? They crossed $500 million for that animated film release. And then you had Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which I think may also crossed over $500 million as well. Those were your 3 most successful comic book films. All the rest of them, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, The Marvels, The Flash, Shazam Fear of the Gods, Blue Beetle, all failures. All went down, and Madam Web certainly, right? Because Madam Web was 2023, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. But yeah, or no, it was last year. Pardon me. Madam Web was 2024. My bad. Got my wires crossed on that one. But either way, I have brought that up before, the fact that there were 9 films. That is definitely something that we have talked about before. I didn't bring it up in this most recent discussion because I was mostly talking about Muschietti's reasoning. But yes, absolutely that's a part of it. No doubt. Without question. Oversaturation. Massive oversaturation from both Marvel and DC, which is why I've said before, I'm glad that at least from the DC standpoint, Gunn has said he's going to scale back. Gunn has said no more than 2 movies and 2 shows per year. Yes, absolutely. That is precisely how DC Studios should operate. Stop oversaturating the market, especially since Marvel still seems like they're okay with 3 movies and multiple shows a year, which they're back to doing this year after taking last year off. We'll see how that works for them. Hopefully, they don't continue to oversaturate the market and really cause the real possibility of superhero fatigue, not having to do anything with the content, but having to do everything with the quantity of content, if you will, for people to spend their money on in that regard. But Jared says, finally, in regards to the Star Trek Section 31 movie, thanks for doing a non-spoiler review of it. It does sound interesting, though I am hilariously behind on Star Trek. Let me put it this way. The only series I'm current on is Picard. I remember first hearing about this movie and thinking, wait, I thought Michelle Yeoh's character died. I'm interested in giving it a shot, though I should probably get caught up on Discovery before watching it. Is there anything else that it would behoove me to see first? Um, okay. So if you've seen, it sounds like you've seen at least the first two episodes of Discovery, because yes, spoilers, that is when Prime Universe Philippa Georgiou dies. That is true. So, if you would like further context on the current Philippa Georgiou, all I will say, Jared, is watch the first two seasons of Discovery. And then, if you are so inclined and you really want to know how she got to where she's at in Section 31, also watch the first half of Season 3. The first half. Believe me, you'll understand when you get to the two-parter in the middle of the season. You'll understand exactly why I said the first half. So that's really what it is. The first 2.5 seasons of Discovery will explain to you precisely the context that you may need in order to understand why Philippa Georgiou, at least the one in the Section 31 movie, is alive. It's you know what it's more multiversal than you think. In fact, it's extremely multiversal. But it's Star Trek's version of the multiverse, if you will. We don't call it the multiverse in Star Trek. We call it the mirror universe. That is as much as I will say. Go forth, get caught up if you wish, and then if you would like to partake in Section 31, which I do affectionately call Star Trek Suicide Squad, then proceed. Because I most certainly will not trash it and torch it and tell you to avoid it with all, at all costs, like so many other gatekeeping fans would tell you in that regard. So hopefully that's enough context for you to go on. And it seems like it's a decent amount, but I think the first season of Discovery is 15 episodes, second season around the same, and I think they got to like 13 episodes. Then the final two seasons they got to 10 episodes. So it's not a ton. I mean, it's a decent amount of context, but not a whole lot, not a massive amount, if you will. So let me know if you decide to watch those, and let me know what your thoughts are with respect to that. Let's get to your second email, which you had some thoughts on Flightcast 194, where you said you liked the TV spot. We talked about the Superman TV spot, the one with him flying. He says, I thought the new shots were cool, specifically Superman's flying. I first thought that it seemed like a good example of the drone filming Gunn has talked about, making the flying feel more visceral and real. I didn't really see the cross-eyed thing until I saw people pointing it out online, but I imagine that either most people won't notice it or it will probably be fixed in post. Yeah, I absolutely think it's a fan construct because I've looked at it multiple times. It's like, okay, I wasn't thinking about it initially, and I definitely wouldn't be thinking about it until I saw people making a giant stink about it, which, of course, leave it to fans to make a giant stink about nothing. I think the majority of the general audience is not going to care. And, whether they fix it in post or not, I don't think they're going to care. If they do fix it, then they really won't care because they won't even notice that anything was changed in that regard, to be honest with you. Or maybe they'll use a different shot. I don't know. I think that's such a non issue, the whole crossed eyes thing. But whatever. It is what it is. Leave it to fans to nitpick bullshit. But Jared also says there's something I've picked up now. Between this TV spot and the trailer, it seems like they're foregoing using a logo for the movie. It works for now, since Superman himself kind of tells you what this is, but I'm curious if that's something they'll keep doing. Um, like, what do you mean? You mean as far as like the Superman logo? Or as far as the DC Films logo? I'm not entirely certain what you mean in that regard. But either way, maybe that's something that they'll break out for the next trailer. I don't know. I don't know why I'm confused with respect to what you're asking or what you're mentioning here, but either way, I mean, we know what the logo is, right? We know what both the DC Studios logo is, and we know what the Superman logo is for this particular film and for the DCU. So I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. Please elaborate on your next email if you could. Um, but continuing, you said now about these X-Men rumors from Daniel RPK. Oh yeah. Ugh. Yep, I saw somebody going nuts about that on Blue Sky, and I had to kindly let them know never to trust that source with anything whatsoever. They are about as right. They're right less than a broken clock is. But either way, Jared says, I'm not going crazy over them either, and part of it for me is that the scoop that Kitty Pryde and Gambit will be in the movies gets a big, well, no shit, Sherlock, from me. Those are some of the more popular X-Men, maybe a tier below the likes of Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. Now, if they started talking about Disney looking for a Glob Herman or Maggot or Nanny and the Orphan Maker and are proven right, then I'll be more impressed. Yeah, that's it, whatever. And Kitty Pryde and Gambit, absolutely, that's in the no-brainer category as far as anybody that we might see in the X-Men films. But you know what? Scooper Madness is Scooper Madness for a reason. They grift and they throw shit out to see what sticks to get our attention, and that's all this is. People that want to get all excited about it, you know what? That's your business. But I tend to wait for actual official word, and we'll get that when they do decide to finally dive into the X-Men movies in the MCU, which hopefully will not be that much further down the road. We'll see. Jared also says, I think it's been confirmed that we won't get a new Superman trailer during the Super Bowl, but I do believe they're sponsoring the Puppy Bowl and that they're going to show some stuff there. I do hope we get some Fantastic Four footage during the Super Bowl. I could see them doing that because I think last year's Deadpool and Wolverine trailer at the Super Bowl helped get the general audience interested. Yeah, I don't really know because I forget who else mentioned. I think Wally or somebody else mentioned that we're not getting a Superman trailer at the Super Bowl. I don't know how good of an idea that is because I still feel like, you should make a play for the general audience attention at the outset. And, if the idea is, well, it didn't help the Flash or whoever else like back then, yeah, you shouldn't be taking that logic, honestly. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but it puts more pressure on the marketing, I would say. That's for sure, definitely. If you're not going to have something in like the biggest sporting event of the year, then yeah, it's going to put more pressure on what you are going to do. And if they've got some other stuff to show at the Puppy Bowl, great, awesome. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes because marketing is key, very very key for this particular film, especially to officially kick off the DCU to the general audience. But Jared finally says, in regards to Gunn's comments about how his past DC movies are in canon with the DCU, I feel like it's more likely to be characters and actors playing them than that will change rather events. You talk about how it's possible that someone else killed Rick Flag Jr. instead of Peacemaker, but we've seen footage of Frank Grillo as Flag Sr. in the upcoming Peacemaker Season 2, and I don't think that Flag Sr. would be there if he wasn't going after the SOB that killed his son. I think the imperfect memory stuff is more going to come from characters being changed or recast. Like, say that they eventually do a Flash project and they decide to have Captain Boomerang involved. They could just cast a new guy that's fit for that project and say that Boomer wasn't involved in the Project Starfish mission, but I guess we'll have to keep watching to see for certain. Anyway, I think that'll do it for this one. Looking forward to your future episodes. Thank you, Jared. Thank you for the feedback. I'm not thinking too hard about it with respect to the imperfect memory, because I'm not somebody that is so beholden to it. For the fans that are, for the fans that just, they want the answers, they want their answers and they want them now. And then when they are not the answers that they want, then it's being ruined and everything's destroyed and all this or whatever. For those fans, you know what? They can do whatever they want with it. They can extrapolate whatever they want with it. But for me, I'm willing to wait and see exactly how it all plays out and exactly what it is that Gunn is going to give us with respect to the imperfect memory. I just like the way that he phrased it. I just like the way that he gave it a general statement, if you will, like this is how to treat it. For those of you that do care about this is how you should treat it as far as it being this imperfect memory. And it probably will be more about characters, and maybe there will be some recasts that we will see. And that'll certainly, we'll see plenty of Screen Rant articles and think pieces about that on Collider and everywhere else about who was the better Captain Boomerang, who was the better this character, who was the better that character, right? That type of thing. We're bound to see plenty of that with whatever types of decisions they make with respect to the imperfect memory of the DCEU stuff crossing over into the DCU. But I'm willing to wait and see exactly what they decide to do in a creative sense. So won't be too long now. July 11th will be here before you know it, truthfully, to be honest with you. But until then, we'll have plenty of time to debate and discuss any rumors that we hear and any other developments that pop up with respect to the future of the DCU, which is launching post haste here this year in 2025. So thank you as always for the feedback, Jared. Looking forward to more discussion with respect to this. It is indeed greatly appreciated. And that will do it for this particular episode of Flight Chat. Thank you so much to everybody that sent in emails this particular week. Thank you to John. Thank you to Rachel and Wally for returning to the feedback circle. Thank you, Anthony, for your latest email missive. Thank you, Jared, for your email thoughts as well and for some clarification on some certain things with respect to comic book properties and whatnot. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this show. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback. If you want to join the feedback circle, you know where to find me on Blue Sky at FlightCast. I can currently also be reached at the FlightCast Facebook page, and of course, I can always be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.